Okay, as I stated, I would come on and do how we ended up in Texas, Southeast Texas part 2. So just bear with me for a second. Left to tail. Okay, I guess ah, that'll suffice. Okay, so I ended the last video on the process that I went through before me and my son relocated. If you didn't see the first part, I invite you to go to look at the first video. That just says how we ended up in Southeast Texas. Okay, so now once I felt I was pushed against the wall and that I had better had start looking for units or places in Southeast Texas for my son, because the voucher came through for him. And at that point, I decided that, well, I better do what I got to do, because now we're down to the wire and I'll figure it out once I'm there. Get a job, find a weekly, meet people, stay somewhere past, getting him there, getting set up, and all of those things. I knew that there was gray area with that I could work with in terms of um, technicalities. I'll say that in terms of like, okay, well, if you can just find somewhere to sleep, maybe a couple nights a week until you can figure shit out, then that at least will keep you out of the red. Okay, I'll just put it that way. Keep you out of the red, because right now you're just trying to get somewhere and this is what's available and you're down to the wire, and so you gotta basically do what you have to do here. Um, since nobody was wanting to be on the up and up, another situation I had sought wasn't suitable. Okay, I didn't want to take on another caretaker role with one of my son's extended relatives that's disabled. Um, and so I was like, we were exhausted. We were under siege then, we didn't know we were, but we were exhausted and tired then due to all the stalking and the weird shit, because weird shit was happening. Okay. All the spell work and stuff, even there. Okay. So I was like, okay, so I better do this and we'll have to, figure this out, blah, blah, blah. So now here's the thing. Y'all know this about searching for apartments, and I love this, right? Especially if you're going to be dealing with like an older place. They'll give you pictures of like a new machine they bought and the rest of the shit is trash. Okay? They'll put on a listing, okay, the stuff, that most people are looking for, like, oh, and then if you're not familiar, now here's where it gets interesting. If you're not in the state to go and visually and physically look at it, then you're gonna go, oh, okay. And you're not familiar with any of it, and you're in what? What do these powers that be take advantage of? Down to the wire, you don't have any options and choices. What the fuck you gonna do? So, he responded like, bing. And I remember thinking, looking at it, like, I was like, okay. I was like, huh? And he was very persistent and all too helpful. See, this is what I have to talk about, because I believe folks like him right now may be trying to seek legal help because they have a tendency, a pattern that they're trying to project off onto all of these various populations as if they were being taken advantage of. So he was all too helpful and willing, because I was very hesitant. I was hesitant for so many reasons. Again, I didn't get to go and view. Most of the time, you're not going to just go into no apartment. I didn't get to go walk the land and see any of that, to see if this would be suitable for Darrell, to see if I could find my way there, to get myself where I need to be, so that, you know what I mean? It's the scarcity tactic. Restrict your resources, restrict your options, put you in a bind and a crunch, make you feel pressure to have to do something. Even if it's not in your best interest. So I didn't have all the monies because I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, it was a lot on my shoulders. It was like, okay, I don't have the car anymore. I start downsizing, letting go, going light. So I was like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And I expressed all this to him because, like I said, he seemed to be all too helpful. And this is all traceable. See, the thing about it, technology, I didn't know until maybe the last couple of years. I just like found this part out, that depending on what you're using, Google, iCloud, even if you, like, say, you get rid of devices, if your settings, that stuff is there. Oh God, it's there. What do I mean? Text messages, emails, it's all there. Hmm. So, I expressed that it was just my son and me, that I was his caregiver, and that we were starting from scratch. And that, did he know? Because I'm like, I don't know this fucking place. Did he know? Because I'm like, essentially, we are, when I say butt scratch, nigga, butt scratch, like, and as I looked at the unit, it was no carpet. So I was like, oh, good gravy. I was like, we don't, yeah. So, I told him, I was like, well, you know, we don't have anything. Do you know of anybody, anyone? And when it was time to do all the paperwork with Darrell, because then it was like, you can just do an email and you could fax it, or you could email it to something. That's the way it was done. And he was really persistent at pushing it all the way through. I communicated that I was not going to be able, because I needed to gather the resources for bus ticket, for the travel, because it was going to take, we're on the bus for 3 days. Okay. The ticket, the travel, the luggage, that I needed to get all of those things together. And so I was like, I remember saying that. I was like, do you want me to give you the deposit to hold the unit? I was like, if you can't afford to hold the unit, that's fine. I could look for um, maybe another space, because I'm not going to be able, I remember this, I'm not going to be able to get to Texas until maybe February, February or March of 2022. And that is when we arrived. I asked him, I said, well, how does this work? Because again, my head was spinning. I had 1,001 things going on. I was not really all that familiar. Again, I'm just trying to lay it out there, because sometimes we're looking at things and thinking of things in terms of how we're going down a bullet point list, but that's not life. Meanwhile, he was having episodes caused by spell work. I was having things happen caused by spell work. I was still having people following me, being weird, and weird shit on the door in the car, and people slitting tires and all kind of shit. And so he said, well, no, let's just go ahead and get all of this through so that we can have it all processed. I was like, okay. I'm like, but I can't get there. He's like, oh, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. We'll take care of all of that once you all do arrive. That's fine. So then he assisted with the process, because you have to, when you go through these voucher programs, you have to, as I have found out, you have to get the electricities, like all of those things are a part of the whole process, the sign of the lease, and the landlord has to get all of that. And he really pushed that through. And he was like, because he gets a credit, like depending on how fast he's able to do it, he gets some kind of a credits or something like that, for having it done fast or whatever. I was like, okay. And listen to me, you all, to be fair, because he seemed to be helpful, I didn't think anything of it. Okay. He seemed to be, he was sending information about like Department of Transportation. And, he said that he may have some stuff in his garage that may be suitable, because I was expressing how we didn't have anything. And so because he seemed to be helpful, I didn't really think anything of it, and I should have. What I've learned in retrospect, when people are over the top, too willing to help get you somewhere, chances are it's a trap. If they're too over the top, and you know what I'm saying, extra, 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 extra helpful, but that helpfulness puts you, if you receive it, if you take it, okay, it still puts you in some kind of a vulnerable situation where they'll have like leverage over you. And that's essentially what he did, because then, okay, so he had Darrell to have all that signed in December of 2021, and Darrell didn't arrive until March of 2022. Who was in the unit? Who was in the unit from December until March? He was getting rents. You know why I talk like this? Once again, because when people try to scapegoat you and single you out for doing something wrong, when they themselves maybe have a history of certain things, it's absurd. Now, I'd already explained to him the situation, but when we finally arrived, everything was shut off. The lights, the gas. I'm sorry, was it gas? No, the lights, the water, because it didn't have water. The lights and the water, because Darrell had to pay the water. So it was the lights and the water was shut off. I didn't know. And his comment was, well, surely you knew you were gonna, like, how would I have known that? See, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. If a person tells you that they need time to get monies together to get there, they ask you if you want them to give you a deposit to hold, you say no, we'll put all that stuff on a tab and add it to all da 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 da. Why would you be paying a monthly electric and water bill when you didn't have the money to do the stuff, which is why you waited, because you needed the money to travel? So why would you have been paying the bill? So this is something else that gave him some leverage and made him look like a very nice guy. Because of course, now me and my son is on the soil. What are we going to do? We had all of $8 left from traveling. So that put him in a position to get more leverage and to put more on the tab towards, he had us to pay back rent for, for December, January, and February. He added all of that on top of, because he fronted the deposits, because again, he wanted to go forward so quickly. And I told him that we didn't have any of that. So he fronted all of that stuff, which once again, it makes people like that look like a really good philanthropist. But this was leverage and control that he put over Darrell and myself by the time we landed on the soil, which means what? By the time you land on a soil, which is what abusers do, that's it's called entrapment. By the time they have you there, they already know what are you going to do? You're in the middle of nowhere. What the fuck you going to do? Call the people that didn't care about you anyway and fake saved, fake holy, fake delivered, fake spiritual? What you going to do? So he put it on the tab. Folks like that, they love that. Okay. Of the back rents we're paying for when he wasn't there. And I'm going to keep saying this because I am annoyed by the absurdity of how some of these people are trying to call themselves behaving right now. Because that, sounds like this possibly could be a serious violation. So he added that on top of the deposits for the deposit that he was requiring, the back rents on top of the deposit for the utilities, on top of, since by the time we arrived, everything was shut off and they needed to get back cut on. I didn't have the money. That was a given. He knew that. So again, doesn't this make people like that look like they're so caring for the community? Mm-hmm. So a payment plan was set up and my son paid every bit of it. Just for the record. Okay? Even though this was wrong and it looks like we are taking advantage of him, but in truth, he took advantage of him, my son, and me. Because when people are in a vulnerable position and you know they're in a vulnerable position, but needless to say, my son didn't miss a beat. Paid every bit of it. Paid all the rents, the unfair cost because he wasn't there. Who was? but he paid. I'll be talking as I continue on this whole path of breaking down each increment of what happened throughout each location, each transition, all the attempts of applying all that. And this when we, he wasn't happy with just the regular monthly payment. This is when we ended up having a conversation one day that I believe which initiated more irritation and agitation on his side. Because, oh, lo and behold, they informed you wrong. I will stand up for myself. And what do narcs and narc types do? That's when Project Retaliation commence. That's when extortion and all of the things they started to conspire to do. Because, and that's when I said, okay, I said, because I could communicate very professionally. I think this bothered him because, I'm black. So, I'm just, and I'm not even a house slave. So, that's, the house slaves get a little bit more credit. So he was, maybe they told him to press me because, again, as I later discovered over time, maybe because they expected me to possibly not be able to, due to all the restrictions and limitations that they had placed on Darrell and me and the circumstances. And so they were like, oh, okay, well, just start pressing her then, even though she is keeping up with whatever agreements that you all have made on his behalf, because we did. That's why I said these people made it obvious, for the simple fact that, as for all intensive purposes, as it pertains to my son's stay and his account and activity, pristine. That's why they made this shit obvious. So I said, okay. I said, well, maybe I understood wrongly. I said, very well. He started pressing, and he gave me information and resources to programs to get assistance, to get rents paid and stuff like that. Because I, again, new to the state, I didn't have no knowledge of all this shit. So I tried initially. I didn't get anywhere. I continued to keep up with the arrangement. And then eventually I did get through to one. And she laid out all the terms and conditions in which they could assist. And so she was like, you can figure out what it is you want to have covered for your son. But you need to know, like, these are the things I can tell you that they'll cover this, but we don't do this and they won't do that. Like, she basically gave me the layout of what they could do and what they couldn't do. And I was the middle person initially between her and him. And so she said, we don't cover deposits and late fees. She said, when it comes to the rent, I think that's what it was. She was like, we won't cover, like, let's say there's a deposit that wasn't paid. We don't cover deposit and we don't cover late fees. So if it's just the rents, we're only going to cover the rents that the actual rents. And that's all, whatever that amount is. And I was like, oh, okay. I said, well, I will let blah, 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 blah. I'll let him know that, this is what you all are able to do and the limitations on that, what could be covered and so forth. So where am I going here? Again, this has to happen. And all of this is traceable. It has to happen. When individuals are trying to scapegoat you and sing you out and it's premeditated in the first place, it's absurd. It's sickening, it's absurd, it's ludicrous, it's all the words. While trying to have a sanctimonious stance at the same time. So that's why I said this has to happen. I said, the communication took place. And that's when some of it took place via text messaging when we didn't have conversations. And then others was through conversations. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, well, that's okay. I remember this. Because, see, folks like that is always down to the money, baby. I guarantee it. Anytime it comes to them, this is lessons that we'll all learn someday. When people are being sanctimonious and highfalutin and call themselves fine-tooth combing you. Look close. You'll smell a stench. This is when, he was like, oh, well, don't worry, don't worry about it. I can type something up and I'll break it down the wherever it needs to be broken down so that we can have it all of it covered. Did you hear me? I'll break it down wherever way it needs to be broken down, because he got excited with the fact that he was about to get all of it in a lump sum. And he did. And he typed that up and submitted that to her. But that's how we got to that. That was the involvement. That's how it happened. It's why. Because if he had not been doing all those things, I would have maybe have been forced to look for another spot. Or, you see what I'm saying? Because if he would have been like, oh, no, blah, 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 then I would be like, okay, well, I can't do that because I can't put, you see what I'm saying? He seemed all too willing to work with my son. So it's like, okay, what is the likelihood of that? Willing to pick us up at the bus station? Huh? When we got there, it was furniture that was soaking wet, like he went and found it from on the side of the road with bugs in it. Oh, you all are not ready. You're not ready to know. Most of you don't want to know because you hold people in high honor. You don't want to know. It's easier to think folks like my son and me are the problem. it's more convenient to look at me like I'm some kind of drug addict prostitute looking for a free ride. That's easier than to have to accept people, that's been members of society for 30 years in business as foul. That's easier, especially when there's a strong presence of racism. And don't give me that about their black friends. People, everybody got tokens. They're black friends, and there's somebody that's their baby daddy is black, and they don't give me that. People like either house slaves or field slaves that their spine and backbone has been beat out of them. Those are the ones they like. But people who don't care about whether or not they have money or how poor they are or whatever, or what complexion they are, but have a spine that says, I don't care what you've done, your communal narcissism, you will speak correctly to me. He accused me of taking advantage of him, and I remember kind of chuckling and laughing because I'm like, I don't see how that is. I wasn't trying to get him or nobody else to set the record straight. Let me set the motherfucking record straight. I was really hoping or banking on basic human, humane humanity treatment from everybody that I've came in contact with. But I was not, was not looking for people to feel sorry for my son or me or to take advantage. I was looking for basic human decency, especially when people go out of their way to get you in the situations and they know what your story is. And so you know that the person don't have. So I was looking for a basic human decency. That's where all these crazy stuff started. It was already in the making, unbeknownst to me, as the arrangements were being made before me and my son even landed on Texas soil. We got sick. We had all these weird occurrences. Somebody put a snake in front of his door. I got bit up by all kinds of shit. And we were drained and tired for no reason, for people who don't do shit. Young people. My son got gray hair. He's just 32. They've been depleting his fucking energy, and they're going to pay for that. And they little witches. As have been standard, every time it's time for my son to transition, it's like people are upset that maybe they're not getting the full deal. But the point that I've been making for some time now is, as I said, for all intents and purposes, as it pertains to my son and his tendency and, the activity and, all that comes with anything, whether it's in a government program or not, it just, even it's just in a standard place. But his tendency, the activity with his unit, and his account pristine tenant. So the fact that these people have such issues is revealing of their ill intentions, of their hatred. Because again, once again, towards the end of his stay, like I said, there was this lawn care dude named Rick, because my son had to pay to get his own grass cut. He had to pay for the water. All the shit was super high because the motherfucking place was ran down. Yet it seemed to pass housing inspection. Go figure, with brown water. And that's on video as well. With brown water coming out. How did that pass? Hmm. But then they want to fine tooth comb me about policies and things of that nature, with their assumptions, by the way, because of somebody who don't like somebody and decided that they didn't like somebody standing up to them and decided to pull that bullshit. That's why I say this stuff is absurd. That's why you all hear me say stuff like terms like double standard, hypocrisy, because everything I'm saying to you, I'm sure somewhere that there's a problem with it, that there's some cases down, not just against the rule, downright illegal. Rules are one thing, law is different. I'm sure racketeering is a problem. I'm sure doing shit for money. Ain't just against the rule. That's a crime. It's like there's the projection to imply that that's what my motive has been, when in fact it's been their motives to mislead. When I started realizing that I was going to have more and more difficulty once we've got here, and as I started trying to get to know people around and see what job options were available, and, as I started scoping the land, searching online, walking around, you know, to the places. This was Silsby at the time. It wasn't Beaumont. So this was Silsby, which is, yeah. Okay. As I started doing that, realizing that it was going to be more challenging than I thought to just find somebody, find a weekly, find a little jobby job, because Vegas, honey child, you can get you a customer service. I mean, the Madama doesn't in Las Vegas, Nevada. You can have yourself something within some days. Um, but once I realized that, you know, I met some old people, several, yeah, especially when I was in Silsby, and yeah. Um, realized like, okay, this is going to be a challenge. Okay. I got to find somewhere I can sleep at least a few nights a week. And it needs to be close because I ain't got a car. So I have to figure that out. Okay. And so I did. I did. But it still became more and more difficult. So what did I do? For those of you who don't know, so I saw options, because remember, you have to go back to the first video where I'm telling you all about how, Darrell was raised in primarily 10 years. The last location in California, that was stability. So we're not flighty people. We're not ones that's always looking to move. Now, my relatives is something different. Isn't that fascinating? So once I realized it was going to be more challenging to find, nice Southern folks that'll let me sleep, finding a couple, but realizing this may be a challenge, because if I can't keep it consistently enough, and if it's not going to be close enough, this is going to be a problem. It's going to become a problem. So what did I do next? See, that's why I say people don't know. It really serves humans to just do their life, and it should be a whole lot better for a whole lot of motherfuckers. So I sought the live-in aid application. Lo and behold, you can have a live-in aid as somebody that's disabled and on a choice voucher program. The person still has to submit an application, but it's a different kind of application. But they, essentially, the person requires their doctor, a physician, psychiatrist, a professional would have to state that it would serve this person to have somebody on the premises, okay, to oversee that they're doing everything correctly, to go behind them, to make sure those things. And so, which is a part of what I think why people are targeting folks like my son. That's one of my theories. That you got low lives out here that really don't give a fuck about these people, but they don't even have to be related, or some of them are, but but they're objectifying them to that. They're looking, for some kind of, they pandering to those kinds, so that, oh, I'll be your live-in aid, I'll be your live-in, when it's legit. I'm not saying nothing wrong with it. That's what the program is there for. And I believe that's what they thought they was supposed to do with my son. They got another fucking thing coming. So I saw that. I contacted his caseworker at the time, and I believe it could have been either Catherine Mitchell. I'm trying to think if it was initially with Catherine Mitchell that I talked about it. Excuse me, because that was his first case manager, was Catherine Mitchell. And then for whatever reason, at some point, she was his to-go person all the way up until I'm gonna say midway with Oakleaf Estates. Then it went to Erica Wiltz. And so I was like, okay, I was having challenges, and I was like, well, let me see if I can get that ball started. I even went up to the actual housing authority to submit the paperwork, and they got the first part approved. So they got him approved through his psychiatrist in the initial part, and then the living aid has to do their application. So as I got that application, that's where I discovered that they require 2 years of recent rental history, 2 years of consistent rental history. And I find that fascinating, because what if a person don't even have that? Like, so where does that leave? What, you know what I mean? Like, what if they like legitimately don't have that? What if they didn't pay rent? What if they don't have that? Where does it leave them? In my case, the reason that I don't have that is because my life has been an upheaval, and I had to be all over the place and basically walk away from everything and everybody because, well, y'all know the story. So I didn't have it to offer, and I didn't have any references. My stuff is from California, and I disconnected from all of it. On top of, I didn't even want, at that point, I didn't even want the California people, because I didn't know how involved they were or were not with this harassment and stalking and weird things with me and my son. So I was calling myself keeping some privacy, not wanting them in my freaking fucking business. So I didn't have a problem with them running an application. My son completed his research, and on that, I stated that, and based on the letter that they sent talking about occupancy, might be, I can even show y'all that letter, because the way it's worded is may be living unauthorized, may be living. My response, I responded to it on my son's behalf with his recertification online. Just, you know why I did that? Let me explain. As I even stated, he don't feel safe, I don't feel safe, we don't feel safe. We've been violated. I am being followed and harassed every day. The people in the very building are involved that he lives in. And staff members. And to set the record straight, I did that because I was like, let me set the record straight. I don't have a problem. I just don't meet the criteria in terms of that. Everything else I check off. It'll be just fine. But in terms of, I don't have that to offer them. I don't have any references to offer them. These people have made sure that I don't have no fucking connections, honey. With the exception of 2, well, let me take that back. 1 that they don't know of. And that ain't even a real connection. That's just, I can sleep here and there. And that's getting less and less and less. So that's why, and that's still to me not going to remedy what's going on, because at the end of the day, even submitting that, if they're willing to do it without references and without what you call it, rental history, getting it, that's not going to fix the greater issue. It's not. They're still stalking. They're still trying to poison. They're still trying to entrap. They're still doing spell work. They're still scheming. So that's going to remedy that if that's something that they're even willing to do. But the reason why I'm saying all this is because it's absurd. When you start to hear the full story of everything that actually took place and you look at what they're trying to do now, it's absolutely absurd. People were sent in for that reason. I mean, I see clearly. There's no more mystery for me. I think since there was so many players and layers to this thing, it made it convoluted. But as we started to just break down, if we want to just focus in on the housing aspect of it, and like those, it's clear. It's crystal clear. So what is the real issue? And what is these people's problem? If, like I said before, now that I've kind of poo-pooed on the notion that these people are like as, pious and, as they're trying to come off when it comes down to them getting some extra change, what they're willing to do. So if that being what it is, truth, then what's their problem with me either way it went, even if their accusation was true? Exactly.